Everybody, fascinating guest and topic today, diving into the impact of AI in marketing and business with a true thought leader and innovator. Tim, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'll try to live up to that introduction.
Well, I think you will, and really fascinating topic. Really haven't talked about this on the show. Before that, maybe introduce yourself as founder and CEO of Big Valley Marketing, a company many of us know, but for those who don't, what was the big idea behind Big Valley? And tell us about the journey.
Yeah, well, so I started the firm 11 years ago. I've been doing marketing and communications throughout my career. I say 25 plus years. I've just stopped counting the numbers after that. And I don't know. For a while, I have seen that just there's this problem in at least the tech world, if not beyond, where a lot of the firms that have existed on the marketing services front, whether it's an ad agency, PR agency, digital shop, et cetera, that they have not been as well set up to be able to meet the needs of today's technology marketers. So we've built out what we call a team of experts to be able to provide what we think is better service, more efficient and effective marketing, to be able to help them across a variety of disciplines. So we've been in business 11 years, really started to hit our growth stride about 5 years ago, which helped us become one of America's fastest growing private companies, according to the Inc. 5000 list 2 years in a row. So we feel like we've got some good momentum.
Fantastic. So lots of hot topics here: AI disclosure, bridging the trust gap, historically low level ethical responsibilities around AI and content creation, and on and on and on. Where do we start? How do we frame the discussion here when it comes to, use of AI in marketing and in tech in particular?
I don't know. Maybe I'll start with just an anecdote, which I don't know got us pursuing this topic. So I was at a research conference last March, and obviously, OpenAI launched ChatGPT. What was it, November 23? So this conference was March 24, and everybody was talking about AI and what the impact of AI would be. And there was some the conference I was at was really about public relations research, and one of the 3 or 4 of the different presentations talked about disclosure and transparency. And there was one example that just to me jumped out as like kind of a really stupid example, but where there had been a shooting at Michigan State, and some other college or a lot of other colleges were trying to provide commentary or provide their perspective on the shooting. And one university in particular wrote their statement about the Michigan State shooting and had ChatGPT write the statement, and that disclosed that ChatGPT wrote the statement. So you would think, oh, they're disclosing it. That's a good thing, right? But it's such an inappropriate use of AI because people are looking for like, hey, what does the university really think? Like ChatGPT can't, ChatGPT could reasonably tell you, well, here's what other universities are saying, or here are the themes that people bring up. But to actually, I think, have ChatGPT write the statement and then say that they wrote the statement, like inherently people are not going to trust that. And that just got me really thinking about like, okay, we've got some really kind of warped things going on. Like that's kind of an extreme and to me a bad example, but it really speaks to, well, what is the appropriate use of AI? I mean, generative AI is the new game in town, but just AI more generally. What is the appropriate use? What is the responsible use? And I think there's been a lot of discussion about responsible use, but I don't think there's been as much discussion about appropriate use. And for us as a marketing and communications firm, we were really also just trying to dig into, well, what is the responsibility of marketers and communicators on this front? We definitely have seen a lot of AI ethics discussion by technologists, but generally we haven't seen as much, I think, leadership or as much advocacy from business or marketing or communications leaders outside of the technology leaders. And so we decided to dig in and really understand, like, what are the issues? What are people saying about disclosure and transparency, and what are the norms that are starting to form there?
Really interesting topic. And that was an unfortunate anecdote, but every day there are more anecdotes. So I guess at some point it's no longer an anecdote. The Fantastic Five movie poster, probably generated by AI. Fans are a little bit upset with that. Google Super Bowl ad had to be redone, had some false hallucinated fact in it.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and
talk.
maybe another one that struck me from last summer with the Olympics was, and I think it was a Google Gemini ad, but where it was a dad who had a daughter who was really a big fan of, I forget which track and field athlete, but the daughter wanted to write a letter to the track and field athlete, and the dad in the commercial was talking about Gemini helping write the letter. And to me, that is another just higher profile example of, I think, inappropriate use. Not that it's, oh, you can't, like, if you're trying to improve the writing, that's one thing, but I would imagine the athlete would prefer to hear from the 11-year-old or 8-year-old or whatever in her own words, as opposed to hearing what ChatGPT kind of wrote for that person. And I can just imagine that, okay, there were people at Google who thought, hey, this is a great use case to be able to show. And I'm like, no, that's not really the most appropriate use of generative AI. If you're trying to improve writing, or if you're trying to, I know there are a lot of appropriate uses, but they were trying to tap into the emotional heartstrings and tie in with the Olympics, which I get, but I don't know. To me, it's an example where, like, if we're just looking at this from a technology lens, we're missing a lot of, I think, the human dimensions of this that need to be factored in more closely.
Yeah, so well said. So your solution is to openly disclose the use of AI to kind of close this trust gap. How would that work exactly? And do you think that's the ultimate solution?
Well, so when we started this, I was of two minds, and I've heard various people lay it out, but laid out this way. But on some level, people, let's just take the use of AI in a writing context. Whether it's Grammarly, whether it's ChatGPT, whatever tools that people might use. Do you need to disclose that you're using it? And part of what we saw, and part of what I've believed, is that on some level, we don't disclose that we used Google search to be able to help us research some things, to be able to inform a blog post or inform something else that we might be writing, or LinkedIn post or whatever. We also don't disclose that we use Microsoft Word spell check in the process. So why would we disclose that we use ChatGPT for some of the same kinds of things? So I think there's maybe a little bit of a different expectation that people have about AI because it's new and people are trying to figure it out, that maybe you need to disclose that more. On the flip side, I think there are legitimate reasons why people would want disclosure, because it's what I call chain of custody of, like, the ideas or the information. And it's because there are concerns about with AI, about plagiarism, about deep fake, about misinformation, and other issues that I think, where people would want to know, hey, did you use AI to help you write this? So I don't know. I saw a tension there, and I guess legitimate perspectives on both sides. So we dug into it to really kind of find out, well, what are people defining as policies? And there are a lot from individual organizations. There are a lot that have been published by associations that represent various job functions or industries, and it's kind of all over the map. What seems to be common across all of them is there is an assumption that transparency breeds trust. And that's where we started to find, because a number of the studies that have been published about, do people trust AI, I'm rounding it to 80%, but 80% of people don't trust AI across a number of surveys. Sometimes it might be 82%, 74, whatever. But if you're saying, hey, we use generative AI in the process of this to be able to breed trust, it doesn't actually breed trust. It breeds mistrust at the outset. So I don't think it's just a matter of, like, hey, disclose that you used AI either in this writing or that you're using AI in this product. I think you have to get deeper than just the simple act of disclosure, and get into a little bit of the how it's being used, but also the why it's being used, and the who is using it. And this is where I think one of the key findings from the study we did was that most of the current guidelines focused on the what and the how of AI disclosure, as in, hey, we used ChatGPT for this, or we used, Perplexity for this, or, the how being like, oh, a watermark on an image to be able to show, or some other things. And, to me, those are, okay, coming from technology companies, yeah, they would focus on the what and how. But I think where the disclosure matters more is the why, which gets to, was this appropriate use of AI? Do I think like, oh yeah, I can understand why you'd use that from an editing standpoint to improve your writing, but also the responsible use. Like, was this a responsible use of AI, which ultimately gets to the who. So who is using it? So was the AI use filtered by, Evan used this to be able to help him with his writing, and you're saying, hey, I use this for editing help. Like, I think people go, okay, cool, that's fine. If I use this to generate my own opinion about what something would be, I think people would look at that and say, wait, no, I want to know what you think. I want to know what ChatGPT thinks. So I think getting much clearer on that, the who and the why, I think really speaks to the heart of where disclosure can be helpful as opposed to distracting or harmful.
Well, really interesting take. So on a positive note, do you have any more positive anecdotes of, companies disclosing their use of AI or best practices or that sort of thing?
It's a little bit early to tell, because most of the other thing that we found is that most of the guidelines are, well, there are two dimensions of this. One is they're what we would call first wave efforts. So they're drawing primarily from what an organization already has published as either their ethics or brand or values, professional guidelines. So I would say it's like, oh, now we're dealing with this new thing. How do we adapt how we've always thought about our values or our ethics to this new thing? I feel like, at that point, there's very little learning about generative AI in practice at that point. So I feel like there's a second wave or a third wave that's going to have to happen in terms of, okay, now that we've actually used generative AI and had some back and forth and learned from that, how will those disclosure guidelines evolve? So, there's some good examples out there. We've included some of them in our report. But I think there are definitely, there's a second wave or a third wave that's needed to be able to bring them more to practical experience. The other thing that we found is that there's very little empirical research on this. So most of it is based on, oh, here's our belief system and our opinions about this. And so here's what our AI guidelines will be. But I don't think there's been a lot to really know, well, what actually resonates with customers, or if you're in a political realm, what actually resonates with citizens. And again, there hasn't been practical experience with it. So we need some more practical experience. But I think there need to be more empirical studies about, as an example, for some of the Super Bowl ads that have been created or generated partially with AI, does that bother people? Does that matter to people? Are they like, hey, it's in the creative process, so it's totally fine. As long as it's a good ad, it's a good ad. If it's funny, it's funny. I don't care what's behind it. Or do people mistrust it just because AI was involved in it? And, I don't, obviously the companies doing Super Bowl ads haven't published the studies that they may have done, or the focus groups or the surveys that they've done to be able to test that. But I think we need to get to a place where more of that is shared to be able to really learn from, because I don't think it's black and white. It's not like, oh, either we trust it or we don't trust it. I think it's, again, goes back to, is this appropriate use? Is this responsible use? If it's in the context of creative idea generation, like, hey, that's fine. If it's in the context of like, hey, I'm trying to research a topic and really kind of get to some insights fast. But if it's like, hey, I'm trying to really base material decisions on this data that may be flawed or may be distorted or may, have bias based on that, like, okay, there should be a higher bar for that.
Yeah, well said. So let's take this down a notch to our sort of personal points of view a bit. I mean, I've seen Gen AI as a boon. I mean, it's 10x my productivity and output. I mean, just an anecdote here. I mean, this recording, this video will be edited by AI, turned into a blog, automagically, and social posts, and it's pretty phenomenal. I feel like I have a team of 10 versus 2.
Yep.
And I'm sure you're doing things on your end internally to scale and to leverage AI benefits. But what does that mean for our customers and beyond? You've heard stories of clients being quite unhappy that they found out their deliverables have been all done by AI, and there's a lot of shenanigans happening too. How do we take a more ethical approach as content creators, marketeers, agencies, et cetera?
So many questions, so many elements there, but I think that the core of it is, I mean, how you're using it and how a lot of people are using it, I would say, is for automation and productivity, right? And I don't know, to me, what's interesting there is that you've probably had to invest a lot of time to really learn how to use the tools in the back and forth. And, you learn through prompts and other things like how to use them better. I think where the real automation and productivity benefits are going to come, not just for Gen AI, but other AI, is really when it gets built more into the workflow tools and applications that we use for other things. So instead of like, oh, I'm going to ChatGPT to do this, the Grammarly use case to me is maybe a more productive one going forward, because it's like, oh, well, we're using it in the context of very specific workflow. We have a client that uses AI that's basically helps companies with RFP management, with RFI management, and all kinds of other strategic responses that companies do. And AI is a big part of what they're building into their software. And there's huge automation and productivity benefits for that. On one level, hey, we've got these 50 different documents that where the answer might exist. How do we go collate and sift through that to be able to kind of surface the right answer? Or, hey, we've got a 10-page white paper that describes how something works, but we need a 2-paragraph description of it in an RFP response. So can you take the 10-page version and turn it into a 2-paragraph summary? Like, that's, to me, just a place where generative AI is actually very productive and is good at, but that's different than, what is the point of view that a company has about responsible use of AI. To me, that's where, like, no, that goes to the belief systems, that goes to the values that a company has, and where you need to go do that. So I think, you brought up an example of clients. I think this is where it goes into really being thoughtful about, well, what is the relationship and what are the expectations in that relationship? So for us, as a consulting firm working with clients, what do our clients expect? And I would say, hey, if we're using AI in our work process, they would expect to know that that's there. They would have questions about, or we'd have to align on, hey, is that responsible use? Is that appropriate use? I think between a company and its customers, it's a little bit harder, because if you're a B2B company, let's say you've got 100 customers, 500 customers, 1,000 customers. If you're a consumer-facing business and have millions of customers, the expectations are going to vary quite a bit. So what we've recommended in the report is, whether it's about disclosure or transparency or other things related to AI ethics, ultimately, I think you need to, be transparent where it makes sense, and be transparent in a sensible way, but also, build the feedback loop into that so that you're having this back and forth. And I think being adaptable, not being knee-jerk responsive, but being adaptable to that feedback loop. And I think this is also going to be a moving target, because the understanding and the belief based on the experience that people have with AI today is going to be different 6 months from now, or 12 months from now, or 6 years from now. So how do you evolve with that as that understanding grows?
Yeah, really interesting points. And on the business side, it's different drivers as well. The C-suite, they want to do more with less, and this year of efficiency we're in. What are you hearing from them on some of the challenges and opportunities? What are they looking for as they budget this year, for example?
We're definitely seeing the doing more with less, intersecting with, AI is an opportunity to do more with less. On the marketing front, I feel like there's a danger there. Well, the do more with less thing is dangerous anyway, because you can't cut your way to growth, and every company that we work with is trying to grow. And if you're getting the impulse from a CFO or somebody else to do more with less, I mean, the reality is you can't, if your company grew 10% this year and you're trying to grow 20% next year, and you invest the same amount or you invest less, like, how are you going to drive a result with less investment? I don't think AI necessarily changes that equation, but that to me is just a more, I don't know, some of the more business dynamics that exist there. But more specifically to AI and the productivity benefits and the automation benefits, I do think those are very real. And I think, you've seen as much as I have discussion within each industry or within each job function about what kind of impact that will have. I don't think a lot of what workers like us do, or it can be, I mean, you can automate some things, but you can't automate other things. And I do think over time, it's going to there will be a premium for original thinking. There will be a premium on ideation, a premium on, like, just as an example of, for you, things that you've learned over the course of 20 to 30 years that play into the questions you ask, or the knowledge base that you have on things. Like, I think those are going to be more valuable in the future rather than less valuable, but they're easy things to do that, like, hey, yeah, automate that. Like, let's use the tools to be able to help there. So I think the real power comes from the combination of the people and the technology together. And, by job function, by industry, that's all going to kind of be a little bit of a moving target. But I think the companies that will be most successful, the individuals that will be most successful, are the ones who look at the intersection of kind of the human and the technology. The human ingenuity and like how we use tools is as important as the tool itself.
Yeah, I got it. So just as we wrap up here, what are you excited about as we, head into 2025? Any travel or events or otherwise that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, well, the travel part maybe has me a bit distracted. I'm always keen to go to some fun new places. I've got a senior in high school, so we've got a college trip coming up in a month. So that's the one that's in front of me, but hopefully we'll find a sunny climate to go to it a little bit later in the year. On the work front, I don't know, to me, this discussion and just what we see with AI just reinforces to me how just exciting the technology industry always is. It goes a little bit in waves where, like, hey, we've got, I don't know, mobile was a new thing, and that led to kind of a lot of excitement and innovation. And then it started to become, okay, now that was baked into the cake, right? And then, social media emerged and like a whole wave of innovation and everything else. And now I think AI is kind of the newest shiny object. And I think this one's obviously going to be here to stay and have impact in a lot of different ways. But to me, it's what makes our job exciting. What probably makes your job exciting is there's all kinds of change, and the implications of that change and the ramifications on business and people and workflow and everything else is always changing. We tend to be much more on the B2B or the enterprise side of things. So I think the consumer stuff gets a lot of headlines, but I think actually the impact on business is even deeper than that. So I don't know. We're excited about that because it creates change and creates opportunity for everybody. And actually, I don't know, one thing to me with the DeepSeek news over the past few weeks, what's interesting there to me is just how much, changing the mindset about, how efficiently you can go build AI models and everything else. And hey, if you can do it for $6 million instead of $100 million, putting aside the geopolitical dimensions of that, I think that's good for innovation overall. I mean, it's going to be more and more companies being able to adopt AI, more and more, I think, competition. And, over the course of time, and you've seen it too, over the course of time, I think that competition is good. The innovation is good. I do think we also need to have just more, more discussion and more, I think, business and marketing people weighing in about how to be able to do this in a way where it's not just technology for technology's sake, but we also look at the ethical dimensions, the human dimensions of all of this innovation. And I think that's happening in pockets, but it definitely needs to be happening more, and we'll continue to advocate for that.
Well said. And here's to that. What an exciting time to be in tech and in marketing. Thanks so much, Tim. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks for the time.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks everyone for